The United States built and operated 10 internment camps to hold Japanese Americans after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The easternmost camps were located in the two Arkansan towns of Jerome and Rohwer. The Butler Center for Arkansas Studies houses a collection of crafts and artwork created by internees at the Rohwer camp.
The arts and the crafts were sort of how they kept their sanity, and it gave them something to do. Depression was so bad in a lot of the camps, and that there was a high incidence of suicide. And so people would make these little things of beauty to give to each other just as a way to say, you know, we support you and we care about you, and here's a little something to cheer you up. So I think that they really used the art as a way of expressing hope in a time that sort of seemed hopeless. The Rohwer camp opened in 1942 in September, and so the first people arrived then, and then over the next several months, the bulk of them came. They filled their time working within the camps, but then they also had a good bit of free time too that they had to fill. And so a lot of the things that are in the collection that we received are pieces of art that people in the camp did. Some of it was done by students as class assignments in school, but a lot of it is 3D art and found object art that was from people trying to do what they could to decorate their barracks and do what they could to build functional things for their family or to entertain their children. Because again, when they moved, they weren't able to bring a lot of toys, so they had to make toys for their children, and they definitely weren't able to bring decorative things with them. And so they tried to make the barracks as home-like as possible and to have some sense of normalcy for their children and for their families. Jamie Vogel was an art teacher at the Rohwer camp, and she preserved hundreds of pieces of art that were done by her students. After the camps closed, she maintained this huge collection. She willed this collection to a lady named Rosalie Santine Gould, who lived in McGee. She wanted to find a place where it could be more publicly accessible, so she contacted us at the Butler Center for Arkansas Studies because she wanted to find a place where not only the documents could be maintained in an archival research room, but the artwork could be maintained. And because we had both a research room and art galleries, she knew that this would be a place where everything could stay together and it would remain as a collection. The collection is kept in our research room closed stacks, which is through this door. Rosalie gave us a couple of hundred pieces of art and about 20 boxes of documents. This is one of my favorite pieces that wasn't part of the original collection that Rosalie gave us, but one of Rosalie's caveats for giving us this art and these documents was that we make this publicly available to anyone who wanted to see it. And she was very specific that anyone who came from the camps or their descendants that wanted to see the art, that they should be able to see it, they should be able to touch it, they should be able to look at it because it was so much of their heritage. And after we received the collection, through all the publicity that we got, we started being contacted by other people who had little pieces of memorabilia or things from the camps or things related to the camps that they wanted to add to the collection. So we've sort of continued Rosalie's tradition of receiving things from people so that this part of history can be preserved. Now, this piece was given to us by a pair of twins whose family was at the camp at Rohwer. They told the story that a man who lived in the same block that they did had carved this for their mother. And so this was in their barrack the whole time that they were growing up. And then when they moved away, they took it with them, and it had stayed in their mother's house the whole time. And so they were just so happy that it was going to be reunited with other art from the collection and that it would become part of the Rohwer story here in Arkansas. Because it was such a swampy area, it was filled with cypress trees, and so they had these cypress roots. And the people in the camp would go out and collect these cypress roots because they wanted to make kobu, which is this.
What is kobu?
Kobu is the heart of a tree root. And what they would do is gather these and then boil them and peel away all of the outer bark. and it would leave these wonderful, just little bumpy art forms. And kobu actually means bump, but you would have these little art forms, and then they would polish them and use them just for decorative pieces. And then this is an example of a vase that was made out of a cypress tree stump. And so they would use that as a flower vase. This folder has an interesting item that came from the Department of Justice, and it's conduct to be observed by alien enemies. Keeping in mind that the vast majority of the people who were here were American citizens at the time that they were taken away to the camps. And these regulations have things like no alien enemy shall be affiliated with any organization designated by the Attorney General as opposed to the public interest of the United States, nor shall any alien enemy attend any meeting or possess or distribute any literature of such an organization. The other thing in this folder are little coupon books from the camp canteen. Most of the people who were in camp worked in some capacity. Some worked in the kitchens, a lot of them worked outside the camp helping clear land, and they were paid a very small wage for doing that. But then they could use these coupon books at the canteen to purchase supplies, and when they first got there, they had very few things to choose from, but over time they were able to purchase art supplies, and they even ordered things out of catalogs. At the point that the people knew that they were going to be sent to the camps, they had to disperse themselves of all of their business things, their farms, their houses, their vehicles, anything that they couldn't take to camp. And some of them tried storing some of their possessions, but a lot of them just sold things off. But they sold it off sort of at fire sale prices, and so they didn't get hardly anything of what their possessions were worth. So they didn't really come to the camp wealthy people. The people in the camps found wonderfully creative ways to deal with the shortages of materials and personal items. For example, they were able to make Zori shoes out of scrap material and just braided canvas to give them tread.
How did they know how to do this?
Necessity. Necessity became the mother of invention for them. I'm sure some of the people who were there already had skills and they'd passed those on to their neighbors and their friends, but they used whatever was available. This one is made out of dried grass that they gathered from the surrounding area. So this would be like a shower shoe. They made a lot of their own tools. They would take dinner knives and things and sharpen them to use as carving tools. And then as time went on, again, they were able to order things from catalogs or get supplies. Also, a lot of community groups would send things into the camps because there was a lot of sympathy for the people who had to move in there, and so the good-hearted people would put together care packages and send in. These three pieces are bird pens that were carved from pieces of scrap wood. The bird pens were almost a phenomenon across all of the camps because they didn't take a whole lot of materials to do, and it became a real skill for people to make these little birds. They would use things like Audubon prints as their models, and so if you look at bird pens from the different camps, you'll see the same model bird from a lot of different locations. But there's some really wonderful things about these pieces. I mean, obviously they're beautifully carved and the painting on them is just highly detailed. But you can see things like on the back, they use little safety pins for clasps. And because bird legs are so small, they couldn't really carve them well, and so they would use tiny pieces of wire to make the legs. And I heard stories about how they would take little pieces off of the selvage edge of the window screens for the wires and then twist them together to make these little bird legs.
What does this work tell you about the type of people who are at this camp?
I think the fact that they took so much pride in the things that they were making, and they worked so hard to create these little things of beauty, tells you a lot about the spirit of the people who were in the camps. I think the important thing to take away from this story is not to panic. A lot of people have talked about the similarities between the attack on Pearl Harbor and 9/11, because that's another instance when something terrible happened and there was a lot of confusion, and the automatic response was, well, let's round up all of these people and protect ourselves from them. And it was very interesting to hear people from the Japanese American community talk about their reactions during 9/11 and after 9/11, when there was a lot of talk about condemning an entire people because of the acts of a handful of people, and how they just wanted people to remember what had happened in this case so that they didn't make the same mistake again.